global reach programs, so things you can learn online about post-harvest. And so we did a chapter on e-courses, e-learning programs. My favorite of all the chapters is on the post-harvest training and services centers. And this is a pure capacity building approach where people can gain all kinds of knowledge and skills, experience in reducing food losses in their countries by working in post-harvest training and service centers. And then finally, how do we know what's working and what's not working? We have to do evaluation. So monitoring and evaluation practices are very important as well. Next slide. I'll just give you a little bit of the details on loss assessment methods and methodologies. Each of these chapters, let me just point out, is just packed full of resources, references, details. So if one of these topics appeals to you and you want to learn more about it, the way to do it is to read the chapter and go dig into the examples and also some of the references. So what we reported was that basically the past studies that have been done on loss assessment, on the methods themselves and the methodologies, have been extremely ad hoc. And the word ad hoc in this case is just meaning that everyone's making up their own approaches. They're very scattered. They're not systematic in any way. And so we know a little bit about a little bit of things. We know some things about weight loss in crops. We know a lot about some crops. So very, very little quantitative and qualitative measurement has been done. But the ones we do know something about are maize, soybeans, tomatoes, mangoes, bananas. Those seem to be the ones that people are studying the most. We were happy to report that a few new methods have been developed and that these are now available as free resources. You can find these online as manuals or as protocols that you can follow. And if you want to try to use these, you can take training in them. So they're not easy to learn, but they're very practical, they're very systematic, and you can measure losses in any crop that you're interested in. So recommendations are basically to fix some of those problems I just mentioned. We want future loss assessment studies to utilize more standardized methods, and we want them to measure more than just weight loss. We want to measure the quantitative losses, qualitative losses, and economic losses. So we want to look beyond those 5 crops, and we want to look beyond just the few countries that have done studies and learn more about what's happening. So the next chapter. Oh, this one is just a few illustrations of one of the methods that's called Commodity Systems Assessment. This manual, which is the references Legras et al. In 2016, you can download free of charge, so anyone can learn about how to use it. Okay, the next chapter was really interesting. Vijay helped me with this one, and we wrote a chapter that was based on a desk study that was done for the World Bank. So they wanted to know just what's been going on, what in the last decade or so, what has been happening related to what people are doing in activities that are related to education and training. So we looked at a bunch of different things. We looked at activities related to different crops. We looked at university programs. We tried to see what was happening in the private sector. Were there any PPPs or private-public partnerships? We looked at online training opportunity, and a big area that's growing every year is the use of the ICTs. So internet communication technologies are becoming really important. So we created a database of all of these post-harvest projects, programs, special events, and conferences. And we published that as well as we're updating that. So on the next slide, I have a table that shows you just what's been happening over the years. Pre-2011, if you look to see what was happening, there was really a very minor amount of organizations, programs, and events. There was one event we could find. But then as each year progressed from 2011 and on, and 2011 was the year that the FAO started to get involved in post-harvest loss measurement and training. So you start to see things happening. New projects are starting, new organizations are forming, lots of new events are happening. And by 2017, we had 14 post-harvest loss reduction themes events held that year. So these are just to give you an idea of what's been going on. If I updated this now for 2019, I would be able to tell you about even more new organizations, projects, and programs. Next. Okay, so this chapter that we're calling Enhancing Post-Harvest Capacity in National Extension Systems and Rural Advisory Services was based on a project I did with Jorge Fonseca at the UN FAO. We actually started with a survey where we tried to engage post-harvest experts from as many countries as we could, and we wound up with 33 key informants from 20 different countries. And our question really was very basic. It was, does your country provide post-harvest topics? Do they include those topics in the existing extension service or advisory service? And the reply really was that most of these are still focusing on production. But yes, some post-harvest topics have been added. And the topics that were most likely to be found in their teaching and extension systems were something to do with packing or packaging, with cold chain management, food storage or processing, and a lot of them had food safety as part of the extension service. So there was a lot of interest in adding post-harvest topics, but there weren't really any systematic inclusion as yet. So our recommendation was, after discussing this with all of these key informants and seeing what really might work to make this improve the systems and enhance the systems, was that we need to link national systems to the global networks, so that rather than each country trying to invent their own methods and their own ways of doing things, they could just link with existing networks. So the next slide shows you a little bit of how this might work. Traditional extension systems basically just link the extension service to the production research service, and then they work with farmers. So farmers are, telling them what they need. Research and extension are putting together some sort of study and then training, and then they'll work together. What we're envisioning, Jorge and I have worked in a lot of these areas ourselves. We've worked as researchers, we've worked as extension service specialists, we've worked with industry, we've worked as consultants and trainers. What we see as possible without much change at all is to just expand these traditional research, extension, and farming areas outwards to the global area. So national research would become international research, and national extension, it becomes international extension, and then farmers become the food industry and the trade associations. So those already exist. So we just would like to see that happening. The next chapter is on all these outreach programs, the global e-courses and e-learning programs. And Deirdre Holcroft and Devin Zachary wrote a chapter on the Postharvest Education Foundation's e-learning program. So you can read about that in this book. There's also e-courses now available from FAO. There's an e-course on post-harvest loss reduction that's available via Coursera, and that's run by University of Illinois. And all of these training programs are available free of charge. So if you're an extension professional, you can promote these things, either tell your trainees about them, show them to your clients or the people that you're working with. And if you need a refresher on some topics, take these courses yourself. So you can find all the hot links on our website. Some of our e-learning programs have been in other countries. So these are just some photos from Rwanda, India, and Tanzania. Okay, so I told you this was my favorite topic. It was on this post-harvest training and service center. The reason it's my favorite is that it combines just about everything we've already talked about. It takes the post-harvest training and capacity building and it puts it in a local context. The first thing that we've learned whenever we teach people about things in post-harvest is that in order for them to actually use their training, they have to have the tools. They have to have access to the technology. So the Post-Harvest Training Services Center provides a place where they can see how these tools work. They can buy them if they need them to do their training. And then they can also get advice. So the three components that are important for success and that we put into these training centers are the technology itself, or the tools, the training, teaching about how to use it, and then the support. So such thing as, now that you've reduced your losses, how do you link to the market? That would be support. So this concept can be modified to fit any kind of crop and any kind of community that produces food, even animal products or fish. We have several of these being developed right now in Rwanda. There's 3 new PTSCs. The first one was in Tanzania. So there's a lot of workshops currently going on of how to expand these things to even more countries. Okay, next one. The training, post-harvest training and services centers in Rwanda, which are in these photos, are currently under the auspices of the University of California's program with the Horticulture Innovation Lab. That's ending this month. So government of Rwanda is going to pick up these centers. There's 3, and they're going to run them now for the next few years. They've already budgeted for the staff and everything else. Okay, so finally, I just wanted to mention that we need to do the monitoring and evaluation. An important point here, I'll just leave you with this as an idea. Whenever you write a proposal for doing any kind of training, post-harvest extension, or a bigger project like a training center, you have to have a line item in your budget for monitoring and evaluation. So I would suggest at least 5% of your budget be put into this. You have to measure in a systematic way, and you have to document any changes that occurred. You have to look for what's going on in your project so that you can show that your training had an impact and end results. And the end result we always hope for is reduced food losses. Okay, next. So one of the methods that I like to use is to look for the 7 levels of evidence, which Bennett developed a long time ago. This is when I was still a student in college, this came out. So we're looking at all of these steps. Each one builds on the next one. So it's easy to learn how to do this, and you can read more about it in the book. Okay, so thank you. And as Vijay said, put your questions into the Q&A box if you want to learn more about any of those topics.
Thank you, Lisa. And now we have a presentation with Dr. Majeed.
Good morning, everybody, or good night, as the case may be. My presentation has to do with one of the chapters in the book written by Dr. Lisa and myself.
Just opening.
I can go ahead?
Yeah, 1 second. I'm just opening. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And welcome to this program on the launching of this very important book on post-harvest extension capacity building. In the next slide, after the first cover slide, I just wanted to highlight some of the problems in which post-harvest capacity building, how it affects the Caribbean, Latin America. The significance of it, that has been well explained in the book. But I want to, first of all, confirm with Dr. Lisa that we have a similar problem, and we have some serious gaps that we are trying to narrow down, in that the post-harvest extension has really been out of the play, because extension services really focus and geared towards production. So there are many stakeholders who are missing in terms of post-harvest information. For example, the supermarket industry that is developing with respect to fresh produce, the hospitality industry where fresh produce are sent as fresh cut to hospitals for patients, the hotel industry, export industry, as well as the industry associated with other wholesalers, retailers, and the tourism industry. Definitely they are involved in a lot of handling of fresh produce, but the linkages are not there. And therefore, in this presentation, I want to highlight some of the gaps that exist in Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Suriname, and Nevis. Next slide. Here we see here a study was done to measure post-harvest losses in 3 countries in the Caribbean, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Lucia. And the commodities we selected were tomatoes, mangoes, cassava. You can see here, Guyana 34%, Trinidad and Tobago 27%, St. Lucia. So the losses vary between 20 and it could go as high as 34% depending on the commodity. And that's high. In other words, you've got losses that result in a food waste. The next slide, you could actually see what are the factors responsible for those losses. Physical damage. In Trinidad and Tobago is 5%, Guyana 8%, out of that 20 or 34%, as the case may be. And it has to do with the traditional method, for example, in cassava, of harvesting using the fork, where there are lots of breakages and scaling. So you've got a lot of moisture loss and therefore the development of physiological breakdowns such as vascular streaking, poor logistics in moving the produce from the field to the market, and some of the problems associated with cracking, internal cracking of the tuber. Next slide. We have been trying to educate the extension officers, and by extension, people who are involved in the supermarket and the hospitality industry. While we have had very good response from the ministry extension officers in attending some of these workshops and courses, I cannot say that we have similar success with the supermarket industry, hospitality industry, even the tourism industry. They have not been accessing the information in the workshop, and therefore they haven't been attending. So we need to really try to target them. In the last 5 years or so, we have been able to at least get people involved in the roadside markets, the wholesale market, and to some extent the supermarket. But the real gap exists with the tourism and hospitality industry. Here you would see in this slide, some of the things we talk about is using a hand lifter to remove the tubers from the field, but that is providing us a sandy soil. If it's a clay soil, there's going to be breakages. And then you see a tractor. This farmer in particular, he designed his own cassava harvester. I'll tell you what was happening there. The angle at which it was digging the ground was too steep. And all we had to, because he was experiencing a lot of breakages too, all we had to do at the University of the West Indies was to readjust that angle, bring it down to about 40 degrees rather than about 30 degrees. And that significantly reduced the post-harvest losses. You will see here one of a design of another cassava harvester, but again, it's expensive, and so for small-scale farmers, unless you have a cooperative, they would not make that investment that readily. And then I am showing you here a slide where we did a one-to-one training exercise with selected farmers. Here you would see a gentleman selling various types of produce in the sun, which are about 20 to 30 degrees, until his produce would be sold out. And it meant simply to sit with him and discuss, listen, if you put an umbrella over that, you could solve your problem with respect to the heat and the imposition of the heat on the quality of the product. And that he adhered to that, and he has increased, diversified in the volume of product. He sells his product instead of 7 hours or 8 hours, he sells it out in about 3 hours. So he has benefited. This is one of the things that I notice about extension. If you go to a particular farmer, wholesaler or retailer, and you look at their production and you give them little bits to develop over time, and once they can see benefits from that, they will multiply it on their own. Next slide, please. This slide, you see some of the efforts that we will make to encourage people in the case of cassava to develop value-added products like bread, cakes, cassava casserie. Now, cassava casserie is when they take the cassava after they peel it, and in order to dry it, squeeze off the juice. That juice is made into a liquid, which is an excellent preservative, provides a color for other food products, particularly meat and fish. And this is one product that normally was thrown away, but now we are able to utilize it as a food preservative. Next slide, please. This is showing here the post-harvest losses of tomatoes and what are some of the particular levels of losses in the 3 countries that we have measured it. We're talking about Trinidad and Tobago, 27%, Guyana, 34%, St. Lucia, 20%. These are high losses at 3 particular control points at harvest, packing house, and at the retail market. Next slide, please. This is one of the things that we have to deal with. In some of the Caribbean countries, and St. Kitts is one of them, I walked through a field of tomato. This was considered to be an abandoned field. When I asked the extension officer why they abandoned this field, because still there is a lot of tomato there at various stages of maturity that could be harvested and utilized. The answer was that most of the people, the consumers, would use tomato for the purpose of slicing as a salad. Very few or none at all would utilize it for making processed products like a paste or salsa, as the case may be. And when I mentioned that to them, they were very interested. And I showed them slides how it could be made very easily, and that product could be frozen. That could stay for about 6 months or more upon heating and eating. Next slide, please. This is mango, and this shows you some of the physical damages in the 3 countries. Again, Trinidad and Guyana. St. Lucia, again, I want to emphasize these losses. We were able to use the CSAM, what Lisa mentioned, commodity system assessment methodology, to actually measure the losses of mangoes, tomatoes, and cassava in the Caribbean. Next slide. Fresh cut in Suriname. Again, we provided training. In the first slide, you will see here the gentleman here. I provided some training in a workshop, and these are the participants, which is a number of extension officers listening very carefully to the information that he developed in previous workshop, that he accessed in previous workshop. And he has developed a system in getting these produce, and he has a contract with the school nutrition program in Suriname to sell these value-added, fresh-cut fruits and vegetables, doing extremely well and benefiting from the information provided. Next slide. In Grenada, this is soursop. Again, training provided by extension officers, capacity building, demonstration on how it is prepared for export market. Now, Grenadians are very, very secretive about this fruit because it has great potential in terms of minimizing certain foodborne diseases, has certain therapeutic effects, and therefore finding ways and markets, developing export market in order to promote the product as well as the seed and the skin or other value-added products as a case. The next slide, you will see some of the procedures involved, and this still happens, that contribute to the physical damage within the Caribbean, the way it is handled, the way it is packed, the way it is thrown, the way it is transported on the non-refrigerated condition, but all of these culminate in the losses that we're talking about. The next slide, this is an indication of the capacity building that we did by funding from the United Nations FAO from 2014 to 2015. These are the various Caribbean countries, 13 Caribbean countries. We gave them the opportunity to select the commodity they want to get the post-harvest training, and tell you next to it is a column telling you the number of people that are trained. Within 1 year, we were able to train 501. But this is not only extension officers. Involved people who are working in a planned quarantine, people who are working in the private sector, people who are working in the marketing boards, as it is. Next slide. Yes, this is the gentleman here who we provide some face-to-face information to improve his handling system of cassava. You will see that all this is done in the heat, in the sun. And, there will be a lot of condensation because of the heat and vascular streaking. By providing him with information how to minimize the effects of that, he has minimized his losses. The next slide, again, this shows you the benefits of having an equipment that can mechanically harvest cassava. You see the farmer there looking at the difference in the quality, less breakages. And we have some cassava that are being treated with wax and some that are subjected to some modified atmosphere storage to reduce post-harvest losses. Again, this is information collected in the field. Have the data, show them, and do demonstration in order for them to minimize their losses. Next slide. Again, you see here, this is an export marketing strategy that is used for hot peppers. That's a big crop that we export. But just before exporting this, you can see here in one of the slides how it is badly packaged and even packaged and packed in the LD3 containers just prior to export. Again, I have focused on these exporters, spent some time on them explaining how to overcome these problems in order to reduce their losses and increase their profits. Next slide. This is a very important program, the Farmer Field School Project in the Caribbean, and this country is SendKits, where you see a combination of extension workers working together with farmers to come up with the best practices. So we have a best practice by the extension officer next to the farmers' practices. One location would come together, discuss the problem, try to solve it. And it is not only field related, we also bring them in the classroom and provide them with equipment, demonstrated to them how it could be utilized in making measurements associated with quality and quality maintenance. Then finally, my last slide was taken from Aknara and Tata and Juku and Tobon, just highlighting 7 principles associated with extension programs and how it has to relate to post-harvest loss prevention, understanding the audience, identifying the main actors and participants, providing farmers with finance. A very good example was in St. Lucia, where you had a big supermarket conglomerate providing training, providing money, so that farmers would be able to use the proper plastic crates to bring the produce to the supermarket, and they would be able to get these incentives to provide them with the knowledge to reduce losses. Managing the impact by looking at the overall effect of reducing losses, and of course, continuing to do demonstration via radio, television, fact sheets, training, workshop, videos, etc. And looking at an integrated approach as it is. This is the end of my presentation. I look forward to any question via email or as. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Majeed.
You're welcome.
So Thank you very much, Dr. Lisa and Dr. Majeed, for the wonderful presentations. And you have covered a major portion of the book. And the book actually has 19 chapters written by authors all the way from USA, Egypt, Tajikistan, Tanzania, India. And I'll quickly give a brief details of other interesting chapters in the books. And we had a chapter written by Dr. Charles from World Food Preservation Center. And in this chapter, Dr. Charles has given a detail about the journey of WFPC, its mission, programs, and future plans to establish virtual WFPC. And through this WFPC, they have collaborated with 28 different universities from 6 different continents, almost covering the whole world, and 3 research institutes. And in collaboration with these universities, they also offer some scholarships for the PhDs and masters for the students coming from developing countries. And they're recognizing the necessity of capacity building. And WFPC have recommended some topics for the course curricula, topics like food loss, food safety, nutrition, not only for the agriculture universities, but also for the high schools. And WFPC conducts a good number of continent-wide congresses. And the next Congress is on June 18th. That's the first international conference on agroecology. And you can watch it live stream. It's available. And the next chapter was from Dr. Sanaya from Egypt. It's a quite interesting chapter. And in this chapter, Dr. Sanaya has explained the importance of training women in order to reduce the post-harvest losses. And she has explained how the training programs were planned, considering different factors, like the differences in the cultural differences, the differences in the skill levels, and economic differences, etc. And Dr. Sanaya has given a case study on how training in information and communication technologies help in empowering the women, and how it facilitated women in searching the information related to agriculture production, food processing, the market information, and how they could improve their profits and improve their skills. And then we had a chapter from Dr. Julia et al. On the SOBO, the Scientific Animation Without Borders. And the SOBO makes animated videos to educate about the different topics. The topics like the health, personal hygiene, food safety, and also on post-harvest loss preventions. And in this chapter, they have taken 3 case studies. Like it's literally 3 videos made. They make videos again of different accents. Like even in the English language, they make in a different accents, like accent of Indian or African or Nigeria. So over here, the first case study was the shear net processing with respect to Nigeria, and next jerrycan technique for the legume storage with respect to the Mozambique, the hermetic storage of legumes with respect to the Ghana. And then we had a chapter from Dr. Mohan. He's from Tamil Nadu Agriculture University. And in this chapter, he has given a detail about 9 different tools, which he has designed and innovated by himself. And all the tools were patented. And in this, he has mentioned the steps which he has followed to popularize these tools. So by taking an example of the TNAU probe trap, the one which you can just see the side by. And he has followed the 4 main steps, like conducting a baseline survey to find out the necessities of the farmers, and then training the extension officers, and then extension officers then training the farmers. And after the whole thing, the feedback was taken from the farmers, and depending upon the feedback and the necessity for the development, so the tools were again redeveloped to suit the necessity of farmers, and this went on in a cycle. And we had a chapter from ADMI Institute, and it's a very interesting chapter where they gave a case study of an adopted village in state Bihar in India. And they have given a detail of how their experiences in the farmer trainings, and mentioned a case study of the ADMI grain handling system, where they have the two systems, that's ADMI mobile dryer and subsidized hermetic grain storage. And they found a very good results. And they have mentioned that about 14%, they saw an 14% reduction the losses of grains by integrating these two systems. There's a mobile dryer and grain storage bags. And then we also had chapters from Tanzania, that is the top left corner, the Tanzania, the Post-Harvest Training and Service Center. And then we had a chapter from Punjab, India, from Dr. Mahajan, and the activities carried and how they are the training centers for the farmers, and also the food, they are encouraging the food safety thing. And the center, you can see the chapter from Lola, and she's from Tajikistan, and the training programs conducted by the FAST, the organization, and how the training programs conducted by FAST influenced in reduction of post-harvest losses. And we had a chapter from Amity University from Dr. Sunil and Dr. Neeru. And then we also had a chapter from Dr. Diane, where she has given the tips and the steps to be followed for preparing an effective videos, and how to measure the simple post-harvest quality assessment methods. And yeah, so we had a few questions. I think Dr. Lisa has already answered many of questions. So there was a question from Isa. How about the post-harvest disease, which can share the large post-harvest for perishables? It was not clear. Yeah. Yeah, I think there are no more questions. Almost all the questions were answered. Yep. So I would also give a brief description about the next book project of PEF. This is the 100 under $100 tools for reducing the post-harvest losses. It's a very interesting book written by authored by the Betsy, and with Dr. Lisa being the technical editor. It's very colorful with a lot of pictures and giving details of 100 different tools which can be prepared or made, which would cost below $100 and which would help in reducing the post-harvest losses. And as we don't have any more questions, so I think I will just end the webinar. And if any queries regarding this webinar or book, you're free to email me at vijayadav.t@postharvest.org or Dr. Lisa at postharvest@postharvest.org. And thank you very much for attending the webinar, and we'll be looking forward for any questions from your side. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Vijay, and thank you, everybody else.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.